Welcome to my presentation on IPSAS 2, Statement of Cash Flows. IPSAS means International Public Sector Accounting Standards, number 2. So, what do we mean by cash flows? Cash flows. Cash flows is an inflows and outflows of cash and cash equivalent. An inflows and outflows of cash and cash equivalent is said to be a cash flows. Cash flows, inflows and outflows of cash and cash equivalent. So, what do we mean by cash? When we talk about cash, or when we mention the term cash, we mean cash in hand and the demand deposit with the bank. Cash in hands and the demand deposit with the bank. Why cash equivalent? Cash equivalent. Cash equivalent means short-term, highly liquid investments. Short-term, highly liquid investments that are readily convertible to cash and which are subject to insignificant risk of changes in value. I've told you that cash equivalent means short-term, highly liquid investments that are readily convertible to cash, which are subject to insignificant risk of changes in value. I repeat, cash equivalent means short-term, highly liquid investments that are readily convertible to cash and which are subject to insignificant risk of changes in value. That is cash equivalent. In accordance with IPSAS 2, or IPSAS 2 classify cash flows into 3. Classification of cash flows in accordance with IPSAS 2. So, number 1 heading in accordance with IPSAS 2 is operating activities. Operating activities. I've told you that IPSAS 2 categorize those activities or cash flows into 3. Number 1, operating activities. Number 2, investing activity. Number 3, financing activities. We are starting with operating activities. Operating activities, this indicates the extent to which the public sector entity is financed by taxes or sale of goods or services. The extent to which the public sector entity is financed by taxes or sale of goods or services. Example of cash flows under this heading include cash received from taxes, levies, and fines. Cash received from taxes, levies, and fines. Number 2, we have cash received from sale of goods and provision of services. Cash received from sale of goods and provision of services. They fall within operating activity. Number 3, cash received from grants. Cash received from grants. Cash received from grants. Number 4, cash payment to supplier of goods and services. Cash payment to supplier of goods and services. Number 5, we have cash payment to other public sector entities. Cash payment to other public sector entities. If I want to make the list, there are many. But the easiest way of identifying those activities that will be classified as operating activity is for you to understand the sources of government revenue. If you have watched my earlier presentation on sources of government revenue, if you have not watched it, please go and watch it. I have that video on my YouTube channel, sources of government revenue. If anything, any revenue, any items that fall within the revenue head of the government, you are going to categorize them as operating activities. If they fall within the revenue head of the government, you classify them as operating activities. No revenue head of government, we have head number 1. Head 1. Head 1 is indirect taxes. Indirect taxes. Tax levied on spending. They are levied on spending. They are levied on your spending, on your expenditure. Examples of indirect tax, we have value-added tax, VAT, value-added tax. So value-added tax. Then we also have import duties, export duties. They are indirect taxes. So if they fall within head number 1. Head number 2, we have direct taxes. Head 2, direct taxes. I've told you that anything that falls within the revenue head of government, or the outflows that maybe those spending or those things, those expenses we incur in generating those revenue, you are going to treat them as operating activities. The head number 2 is direct taxes. Direct taxes are taxes or tax that are levied on income. They are levied on income. Examples are company income tax, petroleum profit tax, etc. Direct taxes, that is head number 2. Head number 3, we have mining. Mining we have here is liquid minerals. We have liquid minerals. So anything that falls within the head or the revenue head of government, you are going to categorize them as operating activities, or outflow resulting from those revenue. You also treat them as operating activities. So I will solve a question from this question that is very comprehensive from ICAN past question. Please watch the video to the end for better understanding. Head number 4, head number 6. We have head 6 after head. No, because I'm not taking federation account, because we have federation account, revenue head, and those one that goes into CRF. But I'm not in that topic now. We have head number 6. Head number 6 are direct allocation. Direct allocation. So the share of federation account. So where you share the federation account revenue, so the share of that federation account, so you are going to treat that as operating activity. Head number 7. Head number 7, we have direct taxes. The direct taxes we have here are the payee. Pay as you earn. Pay as you earn. Payee. Remember, I've talked about direct taxes here, but the one we have here, they are payee. Examples of direct taxes we have under this heading, we mean the payee of the armed forces, payee of the armed forces, police personnel, foreign service officers, and residents of Federal Capital Territory. So they fall under the head number 7. Head number 8, we mean the licenses and internal revenue. Head number 8. They are licenses and internal revenue. So if you have anything that fall within the revenue head of the government, you are going to charge them or you treat them in operating activities in accordance with IPSAS 2. These are revenue from the issue of licenses, arms and ammunition. The revenue from the issue of licenses. Revenue from the issue of licenses that fall within head number 8. Examples are the arms and ammunition license fees, goldsmith license fee. All those will fall within head number 8. Anytime you see any of those activities, you classify them as operating activity. Head number 9. Head number 9. So meaning that if you are not in Nigeria, if you know the source of revenue of your country, just categorize those sources into operating activity. Anything that fall within those revenue head of your government, classify them as operating activity. Head number 9 is mining. Remember, I've talked about one mining here. The mining I've talked about here is liquid minerals, but the one we have here is solid minerals. Solid minerals. Mining, solid minerals. Examples are royalties on gold, tin, iron ore, etc. Royalty on gold, tin, iron ore, etc. They all fall within operating activity. Head number 10 is fees. Head 10. We have fees. Fees. Head number 10. Fees. Fees are received from services rendered by government official. Fees are received from services rendered by government official. Head number 11. Head number 11. I've told you that head number 11 are earnings. Earnings and sales. Earnings and sales. Earnings and sales. Earnings are derived from the use of earnings are derived from the use of and subsequent disposal of government property. Earnings and sales are derived from the use of and subsequent disposal of government properties, e.g., sales of stores, publications, stamps, etc. So they fall within head number 11. If you see such activity, you are going to categorize them as operating activities. Then we have head number 12. Head number 12, we have rent of government property. Rent of government property. Rent of government property. Head number 12. We have rent of government property. Rent of government property. The proceeds from the rentage of the government properties will fall under this revenue head. If you see any of them, you classify them as operating activity. Example is rent of land and building, etc. Then we have head 13. We have head 13, which is interest and repayment. Interest and repayment general. Interest and repayment general. These are interest and repayment of loans granted to individuals by the government. The interest and repayment of loans granted to individuals by the government, those revenue falls within this head. So you classify them as operating activity. Then we have head number 14. Interest and repayment state. Interest and repayment state. They are interest and repayments of loans granted to the state government. The interest and repayment of loans granted to the state government. If you have such revenue, you categorize them as operating activities. And those charges incur or expenditure incur in generating any of those revenues, you also treat them as an outflows in operating activity. Head number 15. Head 15. Head 15 is armed forces. Armed forces. These are revenue from the sale of armed forces property. Revenue from the sales of armed forces property are said to be that fall within head number 15. Revenue from the sales of armed forces property, e.g., sale of old vehicles or stores. So when you see any of those revenue, you classify them as operating activity. Then we have head number 16. Head number 16, that is reimbursement. Reimbursement are the refunds for services rendered to the state and local government council. Refunds, when federal government refunds the state government or the local government for the services they render to them. Refund for services rendered to the state and local government. So that fall within head number 16. When you see any refunds, you know that one that is reimbursement. You classify them as operating activity. The last revenue head I'm going to examine is head number 17. Head number 17, which is miscellaneous. Miscellaneous are the various other sources of revenue that does not fall within any of the revenue head we have examined. Various other sources of revenue of the government, which does not fall within any of the head we have considered. So anytime you see any of those revenue items, you classify them as operating activities. So the second heading I'm going to examine is investing activity. Investing activities. Investing activities. That is the second heading. These are the receipts. Investing activities are the receipts or payments made to acquire resources that are intended to contribute to the entity's future public service delivery. The receipts or payments to acquire resources that are intended to contribute to the entity's future public service delivery. I repeat, they are the receipts or payments to acquire resources that are intended to contribute to the entity's future public service delivery. Anytime you see any of those, e.g., example include number 1, payment to acquire PPE. Payments to acquire PPE, property, plant, and equipment. 2, receipts from sale of PPE. When you see any of them, you classify them as investing activities. All capital expenditure. All capital expenditure. Expenditure such as expenditure on road construction, construction of water, electricity, etc. All capital expenditure. When you see any of them, put them as investing activity. Number 4, cash payments to acquire equity or debt instruments. Cash payments to acquire equity or debt instruments of other instruments of other entities. Cash payments to acquire equity or debt instruments of other entities and interest in joint venture. Other entities and interest in joint venture. Interest in joint venture. Number 5. The opposite of it is cash receipts. Receipts from equity or debt instruments of other entities. Cash. Number 6. Cash receipts from future contracts, forward contracts, option contracts, and swap. Cash receipts from future contracts, forward contracts, and swaps. When you say any of them, you are going to categorize them as investing activities. The third heading I'm going to examine is financing activities. Number 3, we have financing activities. Financing activities. This shows the claims by the provider of capital to the entity. Financing activities shows the claims by providers of capital to the entity. Example include proceeds from issue of debenture, loan notes, bonds, proceeds from issue of debenture, loan notes, bonds, mortgage, etc. When you say any of them, you classify them as financing activities. Now, number 2, we have repayments of the amounts borrowed. Repayments of the amount borrowed. When you repay the amount borrowed, you classify that as financing activity. Payment by a lease for the reduction of the outstanding liability. Payments by a lease for the reduction of outstanding liabilities. If you see any of these, you classify them as operating activities. What are the methods of preparing statement of cash flows? We have 2 methods as prescribed by IPSAS 2. Number 1, we have direct method. Direct method, this shows the basic cash flows in form of all those items I've examined. That is the major source of revenue of the government. Those items we have examined, the reimbursement, the miscellaneous, armed forces, direct taxes, all those revenue. When you show them under operating activity, that method is direct method. While indirect method shows the reconciliation. Indirect method shows the reconciliation of operating profit to cash flows from operating activities. We want to reconcile the income or the net profit or the surplus or deficit of government. We want to reconcile that to get the net cash flows from operating activities. I will still give I will still make a video on indirect method, because this method, what I'm examining under this method, I actually focus on direct method. Now, these are the two methods. What are the minimum requirements? Minimum requirements for the preparation of the statement of cash flows. Minimum requirements for the preparation of statement of cash flows. You'll be given 2 statements of financial positions, 2 statements of financial position, one statement of financial performance, and notes to the financial statements. These are the minimum requirements for the preparation of statement of cash flows. Example: the following information was extracted from the records of the Accountant General of Harmony State for the year ended December 31st, 2020. Amount in thousands of naira. Share of statutory allocations. We have FAC, Federation Account Allocation Committee, 38,079,795 naira. Value added tax, VAT, 10,248,449. Licenses, 226,134. Repayment of external loans, including servicing, 463,804. Repayment of Federal Government of Nigeria bonds, restructured commercial loan and salary bailout, 3,004,096. Repayment general, we have 2,491,424. Reimbursement, 63,000. Direct taxes, 7,188,886. Retained earnings of parastatals, 10,774,639. Personnel costs, including salaries on CRF charges, 30,951,945. Then we have overhead charges, 15,317,095. Mining rents, 14,945. Fees, 1,405,392. Other transfers, deduction from FAC and others, 1,818,779. Proceeds from aids and grants, 14,616,866. CRF charges, including service-wide votes, pension and gratuity, 15,160,307. Then we have parastatals recurrent cost, 12,156,294. Then we have fines, 15,844. Proceeds of loans from other funds, commercial bank loan, 870,379. Sales, 151,707. Earnings, 724,019. Rent of government buildings, 4,109. Other operating activities, JAC and local government bailout, 632,103 naira. Proceeds from external loans, 700,000 naira. Rent on lands and others, 73,377. Proceeds from internal loan, Federal Government of Nigeria or state bonds, state bonds, 70,882. Repayments of loans from other funds, commercial bank loan, 2,295,835. The following additional information was made available. 1. Owing to the inability of the state to fulfill its obligation towards the payment of salaries of local government staff, a federal government bailout of 301,024,000 naira was received after fulfilling all necessary criteria set for accessing the fund. 2. During the year, the state government made claims for the repayment of 65,483,000 naira relating to funds spent on the rehabilitation of federal roads and was granted. 3. Details emerging from the Federation Accounts and Allocation Committee (FAC) showed the following: amount in thousand. Share of the state January to December 37,911,897. Deduction as source for loan repayment January to December 5,286,680. Total net amount is 32,625,217. Share of excess petroleum tax by FAC 167,898. Total 32,793,115. Note 4. Capital expenditure funded from aids and grants and external loans amounted to 15,387,748,000 naira. Note 5. During the year, the federal government made a transfer for the refund on reconciliation of Paris Club account amounting to 41,310,000 naira. Note 6. Refund of bank charges to the Ministry of Finance in the state amounted to 51,112,000 naira. Note 7. Cash and cash equivalent as at January 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2020, 1,546,699 naira and 301,657,000 naira respectively. Note 8. Other revenue sources of the state government during the year also included an exchange difference amounting to 490,575,000 naira. Note 9. Details of capital expenditure are categorized as follows: amount in thousand. General public service 1,249,653 naira. Public order and safety 120,000 naira. Economic affairs 6,345,000 naira. 345,471 naira. Housing and community amenities 958,396 naira. Social protection 25,091 naira. Environmental protection 27,000 naira. Health 34,522. Recreation, culture and religion 17,863. Education 948,392 required. Prepare statement of cash flows using direct method for the Harmony State Government for the year ended December 31st, 2020. This question is obtained from ICAN November 2021, Public Sector Accounting, compulsory question number 1. So now let's have the solution to the question. Require prepare statement of cash flows using direct method for Harmony State Government for the year ended December 31st. Solution. You have Harmony State. We want to prepare a statement of cash flow for the year ended December 31st, 2020. Harmony State. Statement of cash flows for the year ended. Ended December 31st, 2020. So you are starting with operating activities. Operating activities. I've told you that any item that falls within the revenue head 6 to 17, I've told you they will all be treated as operating activities. So we have share of statutory allocation, FAC, 38,079,795. Now, if you go through the note 1, you have, owing to the inability of the state to fulfill its obligation towards the payment of salaries of local government staff, a federal government bailout of 301,024,000 was received after fulfilling all necessary criteria set for assessing the funds. Note 1 does not relate to that. Note 2, during the year, the state government made claims for the repayment of 65,485,000 relating to funds spent on the rehabilitation of federal road and was granted. That note 2 does not relate to that as well. Details emerging from the Federation Account and Allocation Committee, FAC, showed the following. Share of the state January to December, deduction and source for loan repayment January to December, share of excess of petroleum tax by FAC. So we want to ignore the deductions which was made as source. We want to consider the revenue item there from note 3, this plus this. So we have share of federation account, working 1, share of federation, and let me just say statutory allocation. Statutory allocation, the FAC. It comprises share of federation, account, and that amounted to 37,911,897. 37,911,897. Then we also have share of excess petroleum tax, 167,898. 167,898. That is share of what? Of excess petroleum tax. Share of excess petroleum tax. To sum them up, you have 38,079,795. 795. If you check the share of statutory allocation, FAC is 38,079,795. So, under operating activity, we have share of statutory allocation. That is working 1. That is 38,079,795. Value added tax, 10,000,000 248,449. Value added tax 10,248,449. Then we also have licenses. It's one of the government revenue. It falls within the revenue head. Licenses 226,134. Licenses 226,134. Then we also have repayment of external loans. Loans is a financing activity, so it will not be considered since we are on operating activity until we get to financing activity. Repayment of federal government bonds is also financing activity. Repayment general falls within the revenue head. Repayment general 2,491,424. Repayment general 2,491,424. Then we have reimbursement. Reimbursement falls within revenue head, so it will be treated as operating activity. 63,000. Reimbursement. $63,000. Then we have direct taxes. It falls within revenue head. Direct taxes 7,188,886. Direct tax, since it falls within revenue head, we treat them as operating activities. Direct taxes 7,188,886. Then we have retained earnings of parastatals. Among the revenue head, we have earnings and sales. Earnings and sales is one of those items that falls within the government revenue head. So retained earnings of parastatals, so it will be treated as operating activities since it falls within the revenue head of the government. 10,774,639. Earnings of parastatal. Earnings of parastatals. Earnings of parastatals 10,774,639. So that is operating activities. Personnel cost, including salaries on CRF charges. This is an outflows. Personnel costs will be treated as an outflows. We are still on item of receipts. Overhead charges. Overhead charges is a charges against CRF. So it is an outflows. It will be treated as operating activities. Mining rent is one of the revenue heads of the government. 14,945. Mining rent 14,945. Then we have fees. It's fall within revenue head of the government. 1,405,392. Fees 1,405,392. 1,405,392. Other transfers. Deduction from FAC and others. This is an outflows. Deduction from facts is an outflows. Then proceeds from aids and grants. This is financing activities. Aids and grants, it tends to finance the government project. CRF charges. This is an outflows. Then we also have parastatals recurrent cost. This is an outflows as well. We have fines of 15,844. Fines is fall within the revenue head of the government. 15,844. Proceeds of loans from other funds. That is financing activity. Sales 151,707. That falls within the revenue head. We have sales 151,707. Then we have earnings 724019. Earnings. It falls within the revenue head of the government. Earnings 724019. Then rent of government buildings 4,109. It falls within revenue head. Rent of government properties is one of the revenue head items. So don't treat this as investing. Rent of government building is operating activity. Rent of government building, that amounted to 4,109. Other operating activities, JAC and local government bailout, since 32,103. So that is outflows. Proceeds from external loans, that is financing activity. Rent on lands and others. Rent of government properties fall within revenue head of government, 73,377. Rent on lands and others. Rent on land and others, 73,377. Then proceeds from internal loan. That is financing activity. Repayment of loans from other funds. That is also financing activities. Owing to the inability of the state to fulfill its obligation towards the payment of salaries of local government staff, the federal government bailout of 301,024,000 naira was received after fulfilling all necessary criteria set for assessing the funds. The federal government bailout is also a revenue to government. Then we have other revenue working to other revenue. We have federal government bailout, and that amounted to 301,024,000 naira. Then note 2. During the year the state government made claims for repayment of 65,483,000 naira relating to funds spent on the rehabilitation of federal road and was granted. The state government has spent some amount in rehabilitation of federal government road, and then the state is now claiming it back from the federal government. That is a reimbursement. That means the federal government is reimbursing the state of the amount spent. So reimbursement is one of the revenue head of the government. Therefore, it will be treated as operating activity. Reimbursement of expenditure on rehabilitation on federal roads rehabilitation. The amount reimbursed is 65,483,000. 65,483,000. Details emerging from the Federation accounts and allocation committee show the following. This has been considered. Note 4. Capital expenditure funded from aids and grants and external loans amounted to 15,387,748,000. This is investing activity. So this is an investing activity. Note 5. During the year, I've told you that expenditure on asset or capital expenditure, I've told you they fall under investing activity. Note 5. During the year, the federal government made a transfer for the refund on reconciliation of Paris Club account amounting to this. During the year, the federal government made a transfer for the refund on reconciliation of Paris Club account amounting to 41,310,000. This is a refund. Refund is a form of reimbursement, so it falls under operating activities. So, refunds. Expenditure on Paris Club, and that amounted to 41,310,000. 41,310,000. Back to note 6. Refund of bank charges to the Ministry of Finance in the state amounted to 51,112,000. Refund is a form of reimbursement. So, refunds of bank charges. So, it's operating activity. Refunds of bank charges. And that amounted to 51,112,000. Note 7. Cash and cash equivalent. That is all about cash and cash equivalent. Let's go to note 8. Note 8. Other revenue sources of the state government during the year also included an exchange difference amounting to 490,570,000. We have exchange difference. Exchange difference. And that amounted to 490,575,000. Note 9. Details of capital expenditure. These are capital expenditure. Capital expenditure, I've told you that falls within investing activities. So that is the last note before the requirements. Now let's total other revenue items. Let's total it. 301,024 plus 65,483 plus 41310 plus 51112 plus 490,575. That is totaled 949,000. 504. 949,504. Other revenue. Other revenue. That is working too. 949,504. Let's tie it. 38,079,795 plus 10,248,449 plus 226,134 plus 2,491,424 plus 63,000 plus 7,188,886 plus 10,774,639 plus 14,945 plus 1,405,392 plus 15,844 plus 151,707 plus 724,019 plus 4109 plus 73377 plus 949,504. That is total 72,411,224. Then we want to consider charges against those revenue payments. Charges against those revenue that will fall under operating activities. Personnel costs including salaries on CRF charges 13,951,945. Personnel cost. Personnel of 13,951. 13,951,945. Then overhead charges 15,317,095. Overheads charges 15,317,095. Then we have other transfers, deduction from FAC and others. Other transfers, FAC and others. Other transfer deductions from FAC and others that amounted to 1,818,779. 1,818,779. told you this is financing activity. CRF charges and service-wide votes. 15,160,307. CRF charges. 15,160,307. Parastatals recurrent cost 12,156,294. Parastatals recurrent cost 12,156,294. So we have this is financing, sales has been considered, earnings has been considered, rent has been considered. Other operating activities, JAG and local government bailout, 632,103. Other operating activities. Other operating activities. JAG and local government bailout. That is 632,103. 632,103. You add this. Then we also have other payments here. Plus 13,951,945 plus 15,317,095. The payment is totaled 59,036,523. If you now subtract all the payments from the total receipt, that is the total revenue of 72,411,224 minus 72,411,224, then we have 13,374,701. That is the net cash flows from operating activities. Net cash flows from operating activities. Then that is 13,374,701. The next heading is investing activities. Investing activities. Those items are put asterisk here. I've told you they are financing activities. Proceeds from aids and grants is also a financing activities. Capital expenditure funded from aids and grants and external loans amounted to 15,387,748,000. So capital expenditure funded from aids and grants, and that is capital expenditure funded from aids and grants 387 million and 748,000. Then note 5. During the year, the federal government made a transfer for the refunds of reconciliation. This has been considered as operating activity. Refunds of bank charges to the Ministry of Finance has equally been considered. This is cash and cash equivalent. Then note 8, other revenue. Note 8 is revenue. Note 9, details of capital expenditure are categorized as follows. These are capital expenditure. I've told you that all capital expenditure should form part of investing activities. Capital expenditure, which include note 9. We are given details of capital expenditure. Details of capital expenditure are categorized as follows. General public service. Expenditure on general public service, 1,249,653. General public service. Expenditure on general public service, 1,249,653. Expenditure on public order and safety, 120,000. Public order and safety, 120,000. Expenditure on economic affairs, 6,345,471. Economic affairs, 6,345,471. Expenditure on housing and community amenities, 958,396. Housing and community amenity, that is 958,396. The expenditure on social protection, 25,091. Expenditure on social protection, that is 25,091. Expenditure on environmental protection, 27,000. Environmental protection, 27,000. Expenditure on health, 34,522. Health. Capital expenditure on health, 34,522. Capital expenditure on recreation, culture, and religion, 17,862. Recreation, culture, and religion. That amounted to 17,862. Expenditure on education, capital expenditure on education, and that amounted to 948,392. 948,392. So these are the items that will fall under investing activities. Now let's sum it up. 15,387,748 plus 1,249,653 653 plus 120,000 plus 6,345,471 plus 958,396 plus 25,091 plus 27,000 plus 34,522 plus 17,862 plus 948,392. So investing activity is totaled 251 25,114,135. Since they are payments, so it will be an outflows of cash. The third heading is financing activities. Financing activities. Under this heading, we have repayment of external loans, including servicing, 463,804. Repayment of external loans, 463,804. Repayments and outflows. Then we also have repayment of federal government of Nigeria bonds, commercial loan and salary bailout, 3,004,096. Repayment of federal government of Nigeria bonds, and that amounted to 3,004,096. Outflows as well. Repayment general have been considered as operating activity. Reimbursement have been considered. Direct taxes have equally been considered. Retained earnings have been used. Personnel costs have been used. Overhead charges have been used. Mining rents have been used. Fees have been used. Other transfers, deduction from FAC and others that have been used. Then we have proceeds from A's and grants. Proceeds from A's and grants, 40,616,866. Proceeds from A's and grants, that is 40,616,866. Proceeds of loans from other funds, 870,379. Proceeds of loan from other funds, 870,379. That is an inflow. Proceed is an inflow. Sales, that is operating activities. Earnings is an operating activity. Rent of government building is operating, have been considered, have been used. Other operating activity that have been used. Proceeds from external loans, 700,000. Proceeds from external loan 700,000. Then rent on lands and others that have been used. Proceeds from internal loans, Federal Government of Nigeria / state bonds, 70,882. Proceeds from internal loans. Proceeds from internal loan, Federal Government of Nigeria / state, that amounted to 70,882. Then we have repayment of loans from other funds. Repayments of loans from other funds, commercial bank loan, 2,295,835. Repayment of loan from other funds, that is 2 million. Repayments and outflows, 2,295,835. 295,835. 2,295,835. The following additional information was made available. Note 1 is owing to inability of the state to fulfill its obligation towards the payment of salaries of local government staff, a federal government bailout of 301,024,000 naira was received. That is not operating. None of the footnote, and that is not financing activity. None of the footnote or note 1 to 9, none of them is financing activity. Let's sum up the financing activity item. 463,804 minus 3,004,096 plus 14,616,866 plus 870,379 plus 700,000 plus 70,882 minus 2,295,835. Financing activity is totaled 10,494,392. Therefore, we have net cash flows. Net cash flows from financing activities, and that is totaled 10,494,392. 494,392. So we now want to sum up the three activities. Our operating activities include, these are the items of receipts from operating activities. Receipts from operating activities. This is the total receipts. These are payments. Items of payments. These are items of payments from operating activities. Net cash flows from operating activity is 13,374,701. This is the investing activities. And our investing activities is totaled 25,114,135. Then financing activities. These are items These are the items. Then we have net cash flows from financing activities of 10,494,392. So the sum of those three activities is minus 1,245,042. 245,042 negative. This is net decrease in cash and cash equivalent. It is a decrease because it is negative, but where it turns out to be positive, that positive value is an increase. So the next item is cash and cash equivalent at the beginning of the period. Then if you look at note 7, we are given cash and cash equivalent as at January 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2020. This is the one as at January, this is the one as at December. So the one at the beginning is 546,699. Remember, at the top of our solution, 3 zeros have been added there, so you don't need to write the 3 zeros again. So now let's add plus 1,546,699. Then you have 301,657. This is the cash and cash equivalent at the end of the period. So if you look at the value, your finance are here, you will see that it agrees with the cash and cash equivalent at the end of the period given, the one given in the question. So this is the end of my solution to this question on IPSAS 2, statement of cash flows. Please don't forget to like the video. Thanks for watching ZICA.